Hallo, hallo. Willkommen zurück zu Lesestunde Reverie. Auch wenn wir das letzte Mal sozusagen unser Ende haben, oder hatten. Wir haben, wohl schon gemeint, immer noch eine Sache offen. Moonless Morn. Eine Novel, die Reverie dazu gekommen ist. Und wir haben ja immer bisher die Novels gelesen, die in dem Game halt sozusagen die, sag ich mal, Fetch-Quests sind. Und wir haben diesmal eine recht längere nochmal Novel. Kanal hatte, glaube ich, 14 Chapters. Wir sind diesmal bei 17 Chapters. Das wird eine Weile dauern, weil wir sind trotzdem noch so 14, 20 Pages sind. Ja. Ich weiß nicht, ob das auch eine ganze Folge wird oder ich das dann vielleicht nochmal in 2 Folgen aufteile oder sowas. Ich denke mal, ich werde das auch nicht alles am einen Stück recorden. Einfach, um meine Stimme nicht zu kennen. Aber na, fangen wir mal an mit dem Moonless Morn. Chapter 1, Snowfall Encounters. The girl ran, though her lungs burned with each step that crunched into the packed mountain path. Gasped profound enough to hear, even through the subdued effect of snowfall, she ran. Her attire no doubt contributed to her body's protest, for there was far more of her tan skin to be seen than there was color. It starkly marked her as one who hailed from a foreign land. Yet the coldness in her eyes and cold shade to her hair did as much to melt her into the darkened storm surrounding her. There's enough to fence me in from every angle, but the wind tells me to keep on ahead. Wolves with frames 3 times greater than any normal pack were in pursuit. Their eyes bloodshot and their chase unrelenting. In the midst of the chase, the girl would pivot and fire a bolt from her bowgun. This had no effect in slowing her pursuers, but neither did it slow her. When the moments were right, she would twist in the air, fire, and let the momentum of her shot thrust her backward till she landed and pushed onward. Her agile, wide motions held the practiced polish of one who had long challenged and paraded mountainous terrain. The wolves pursued despite this, charging over the reverend felt by her bolts with an obsession that elicited from her a strange strain of compassion. That they didn't stop now, she imagined, must have meant they couldn't stop. That someone had set them on this trail and made it a matter of survival. Guess I'm not the only one with my life on the line here. But compassion would never triumph over obstinance. Patting the book secured in a waist pouch with her bow-held hand, while clutching a cylindrical trinket around her neck, between her other bolt-ready fingers, she continued. The elements known something of obstinance. The filling air as she climbed upward, the winds swept snow, now more ice than powder, the numbness of her upper body from both despite the fire of her spirit and the blood pumping through her legs. She could persevere, but whatever the mountain was or wanted would be. What would be was a tall, rocky face with a jut that was far too tall and far too angular for her to do anything but stop. The second-long pause was all the wolves needed to surround her. I said there was enough to fence me in, she gritted between chattering teeth, but I didn't mean I wanted them to. The wolves kept closer in a slow, knowing manner, well aware as she that there was no path to freedom. Hugo listened beside to deliver a questioning gaze at the cylindrical trinket around her neck. To her, this trinket was more than a simple accessory, it was a tried and true companion. What to do? She mused for precious seconds. Too much of a gamble. The bowgun in this moment, useless. The wait for death through sunken fangs, inevitable. The mastermind who formulated this chase had won. Or so they would have had ideas not smiled down upon her. As though to roar the girl's fortitude, a crisp gunshot rang out in a moment, sending a flurry of falling flakes scrambling. Tools collapsed to the ground in the seconds that followed, guts of blood stained the pure white around them. Startled, the wolves shifted their focus rapidly from their prey to their fallen comrades, then again to source the direction of the sound. The first to find it seemed to fall with the thundering clap of a second shot. "Where now?" cried the young man's voice through the howling wind, no doubt the gunman. Indeed, the Lupine blockade that had seemed so insurmountable was now weakened enough that her own weapon could finish the job. She gave a small nod to her unseen savior before rushing into the forest of the pack. Into the rest of the pack. Firing bolts between the sounds of more shots from afar. The swirling storm carried with it the scent of explosives, indicating to the girl that the gunsman's weapon was no modern old gun but an old-fashioned muzzle-loader. Which put a question: how were the intervals between firing and reloading so unnaturally short? There's a path over here. After confirming she had made her escape, the gunman slipped his upper half out from the shadows of nearby crack and gestures for her to follow. Having traveled across many lands and encountered all manner of people, she knew from a glance that he was the single most reliable defender she could have chanced to meet under the circumstances. He got a fine figure, with silvery hair that made it into the snowy mountaintop. His face seemed near chiseled from marble with its sharp lines, accompanied by a hunter's eye that pierced as well as any one of her bolts. Even the muscles that covered his tall frame lively and sculpted through practical training. He was, as she saw him, the fresh beauty of the mountain and its crystalline storm in human form. Peeking through a heavy fur coat was the muzzle loader she heard, confirmed to be just one despite its rapid fire. Stranger than this mystery, however, was how familiar he felt to her even when they had never met before. She followed him into his rocky shelter, but perhaps the motion-perfect high from running to survive had already left her. The moment she felt safer, the book at her waist slipped clumsily from its pouch. Her hands were free to catch it, with one hand still clutching the bowgun and the other the trinket. The wintry-haired young man instead used a stock in hand for reloading his weapon to shift the book's course, pushing it to land on his own backs and saving his pages from being dampened by the snow. Thanks, I guess you saved me and my book. You're welcome, but only for the book. The jury's still out on if I've saved you. As he said it, their attention turned towards the wolves. They had done more than recover from the surprise attack. A fellow pack had joined them, swelling their numbers a great deal. He took a closer look at the new situation through the scope of his rifle, a slight twitch born from narrowing his eyes as he focused. He then pointed to a small animal trail to his left and waited for the girl to nod in understanding before entering it. She was dubious of their chances against the larger pack, so was he, she suspected. Certainly, running down a route so familiar to their pursuers wouldn't get them out of their current predicament. I might have to stack the odds a little more in our favor. Taking the cylindrical trinket with both hands, she went into the opposite direction from the young man, toward the wolves. What are you doing? We have got to get... The young man's sound was drawn out by a sudden light, shining through her fingers from the trinket's engravings. What followed was a faint fog, enough that even the most perceptive of wolves could see no farther than their own snout. As the fog continued to thicken, the snowstorm assailing the animal trail calmed to a gentle flutter, then to nothing. Time to go then, was all the girl said in response to this. This way, right? Yeah. We head through here and take a ride. He had never visited anything like this in his countless years on the mountain. He didn't know what to think of it. She noticed. Something the matter? I just wasn't expecting the fog to roll in. Someone up there must really love us, huh? The young man guided her down the trail under snowless skies till they reached the flat housing scant trees. Beyond it were more powder-topped mountains and steep cliffs. The threat was no more. It's hard to believe you lost him so quickly, he muttered, suspicion evident in his tone. It's amazing how fast you can go when you can say. She dismissed his misgivings, instead looking him over while considering his clothing, skill, and where they had met. All 3 points had brought her to a clear conclusion. Thank you for your help, she began. There's something I'd like to ask, if you don't mind. I suppose I don't mind. His hesitance was the only thing that shook her certainty, but only for a brief moment. He must have been a little different from the others she knew of, for the rest of his traits were unmistakable. Are you a Matagi? His eyes widened in surprise for a beat, then another, then silently he nodded. Chapter 2: Mountain Hunters. In the northeastern part of the Sumerian continent, where the impact of desertification was relatively minor, settled a culture considered unique even by the standards of the widely diverse region. They worshipped Mount White-Crown, a place known to have fostered countless ecosystems despite its harsh environment. And through living in harmony with this mountain, they gave birth to technologies and philosophies found nowhere else in the world. The Matagi were hunters of legend, known in song to have slain even the likes of dragons. Yet though once quite known far and wide, and though revered for their dedication to their art through their descendants, they were slowly becoming one of among many forgotten cultures scattered along the eastern edge of the continent. By the ways were still handed down, even in modern times, the Matagi's village was nearly empty, its population comprising mostly of the elderly. The youth had left the mountain to use their traditional methods in more lucrative areas like through the Bracer Guild or as a mercenary for hire. The legacy was fading with the times. As of now, however, two relics to represent it will still feature prominently in the village square. One was a wooden carving of the mountain spirit worshipped at their yearly festival. The second, added in more recent years, was a stone monument engraved with the name and family crest of a legendary hunter, Kiun Olkis. The time was just past noon. On this day, a young man was standing with these relics. He stood out further still, for beyond his age and fine features, his hair carried a silvery tint to it rather than a Matagi's traditionally fair white. His hunting equipment lay at his feet. Leaning back against the earthen foundation that held these carvings, he stared up, not at them, but past him to the cloudy sky, warming his body with sips from a gourd of amakase. We're done hunting for the day, Chunlung. Can't think of another soul who would keep up with you. An old elder who had only aged with greater vigor and dignity as the years went on called out to him. He was a chieftain, and he acted as both elder of the village and director of its group hunts. Afternoon, Golas met and in come for the village's stable. Chunlun replied, hanging the now emptied gourd at his waist as he did so. Those Calvard merchants will take just about anything we sell. Julian Eisen was the last of the villagers who could still be considered a youth. In the eyes of the chieftain, whose role was to see to their continued existence, this made him more valuable than the high-quality prey they often sold to supplement their needs. Now that's some fine work. Fine work indeed. I'm sure your father would be very pleased. Reverie isn't going to get you anywhere here. Afraid my answer's not going to change. Knowing well the conversation that was poised to follow, Julian reached down to sling his equipment over his back and turned his gaze towards up the mountain, toward home. Oh, but I assure you, I meant nothing by it. I'm simply grateful we have such a young, strong... Sure, oh, I'm strong. Went out for a moment. Couldn't possibly be otherwise with that kind of confidence in me. Julian maintained cold indifference throughout. To most, the sight of a village elder scrambling to avoid displeasing a fellow so much younger would be quite a spectacle. But the chieftain had his own reasons to persist in his behavior. He had no desire to be chieftain. In fact, he never desired the position from day one. There were many others who were more qualified than he, but one by one, those potentials left the Matagi its village for greater prospects. After time, there was only him, and while he fulfilled what he could do of his post, his mind was often occupied with finding someone suitable enough to leave him off it. Julian was aware of this. Could he not be with such an unabashed display, making him twice as reluctant to accept anything said? I'm still worrying about what your father said. Best not to let it trouble you, but instead take a look at the people around you. Though the young man had no intentions of doing anything simply because he was asked, Julian, perhaps guided by the blood running through his veins, did so. He saw pelts drying in the sun. He saw elders maintaining their weapons and backs strong. He saw two men, jovial from alcohol, sharing heroic exploits while flaunting old wounds. All things he was familiar with, all things he should have been used to. These people recognize his strength, but still you come here every day. I'll keep it in mind. Excuse me. Julian made for the village entrance before any further discussion could be made, being very conscious of the fact that he was running away, but this was all he could do. before he could tell the chieftain what his plans for the future were, he would have to discover them for himself. His residence was a wood-framed cabin of Western design that overlooked the Matagi's village. Though a bit of a walk from the rest of its residents, he never once entertained the thought of leaving the home his parents left behind. There was discovery to be found in these solitary walks. Things like the signs of spring's returns after a long, harsh winter, or the subtle traces of exotic game having passed through. Chance encounters, new discoveries, and the like were abound throughout this simple trail if one were to look closely. His father taught him, and these were never without value. Today's encounter required no cunning to notice. Any Mataga would have sensed the presence of so many animals, their number being far higher than what was usual for the area. There had to be a reason for it. Jordan loosely placed his hand around his rival, known as a Zurub, or Zurube among the Matagi, a modified old-fashioned model from the Calvard Republic. He wasn't quite certain what to make of this anomaly yet, but he would nevertheless have to investigate further and report his findings to the chieftain. When he found its source, he realized he needed more than a loose crib out of cotton. He needed to be ready to fire. The presence of wolves, so great the size, was already a shocking sight on Mount White Ground, never mind the number. Whereas still was the person they were chasing, a girl, whose clothing marked her as one of a foreign land. The lessons of his past echoed in his mind as he shifted silently into the shadows of his stone rack. Ladies and gentlemen, the Matagi aren't slowly handlers. We are protectors of these mountains, its bounties being blessed from my ideas. His finger was on the trigger, the rest he muttered to himself aloud. We must keep it free from impurities. He squeezed, and upon a fiery burst at the head of the muzzle, hot lead shot through the air, evaporating the snow it passed through in an instant. Just as he intended, the bullet appeared as though it were sucked into the torso of the first wolf before exiting through and downing a second. Chaos ruled through the pack, but the young man knew this was not a certain victory. Wild animals were driven by survival instinct above all else, and any break in the formation would be mended faster than most humans could react. Run now! He fired a second shot. The girl reacted by turning in his direction till their eyes met. Through sawdust winds, he could still see the intelligence in her gaze, more than that, even to an unexpected degree. She was foreign. How could he not see confusion under these circumstances? Fear for her life? Anxiety over her surroundings? Whatever was happening in this mountain, she had complete clarity on what it was. Jordan's first true interaction with the girl came after she entered the crack where he awaited her. He had saved the book that had slipped from her possession from falling into the snow. She made it, he thought to himself. It indicated a path of escape for her to follow, which she did with excellent taste. She must be some girl to have held out against those beasts. The sunlight was dyed with a hint of red as it looked down upon Mount White Ground, where a large pack of wolves were racing along a high road. Several other packs, all being driven in the same direction, collapsed into this larger one until they had melted into a massive swarm. A few edge behind them stood the one responsible for steering them so, leaving them with no way to go but frantically forward. Scattered all around him were the corpses of boars, bears, and fellow wolves. And here myself another mountain whose beasts of revered repute have failed me, the man muttered, with boredom born from tedium, eyes scanning the cold carcasses arrayed at his feet. The man's solid frame, wrapped in red, and his hair, black and shaved thoroughly with unique patterns, would be enough to catch anyone's attention, but it was his skin that dwarfed those otherwise uncommon features. His face, neck, hands, and palms, nearly every visible part of him, save for his ears, was tattooed in arcane symbols that unsettled the mind. So thoroughly covered he was that certainly it would not be a stretch to think that if his clothes were stripped and had shaved bare, he would still be covered. Well, grown, eh? And who thought to ground you? And the lips curled into a sneer as he looked toward the mountain's peaks. With no more game to hunt, you're as good as... Oh, what have you here? Something caught his attention. He watched this something through the snow with great intrigue, sneers twisting into a smile of twisted delight. So while hiding the fun elsewhere, seems there's still hope for you yet, Mountain. With a single effortless thrust, he pierced through a lone wolf that dared to resist him. his stone-tipped spear digging into the ground and forever pinning it to the earth. He then turned to walk with eager footsteps. As he moved, a gentle red glow alight across him through his tattoos, and the grin on his face mangled itself into a level of malice and thirst no human should ever be capable of. Of hunters and wanderers. Are you a Matagi? Jonah had been struck with an unease that what was happening on Mount Whiteground was only the start of something bigger, which was also why the simple question struck him so. He wasn't sure how she, a clear foreign girl from somewhere very distant, had immediately recognized him as a Matagi, when even the local lands had long forgotten how to make this distinction. His features held no particular tells, nor did his clothes. Not even his sharpshooting was anything. He felt different enough to reveal he was of fighting people. There was another reason he hesitated. Did he have the right to call himself a Matagi? The girl turned her head with curiosity as she waited for Junan's answer. Knowing this to be no time for ambiguity, he nodded. I knew it. She appeared to mean that. For the first time since the ordeal, she expressed a small, warm smile. How did he know? I met one of you a long time ago, a vagabond. This too struck Junan. Some Matagi were vagabonds back during the Golden Age, but now most remain close to the village. So few among them traveled that he was certain he would have known who she was. Talking about it right away were true. Of course, it could have been one acting as a hired gun or Jäger, but still touting their heritage to make a name for themselves. He couldn't know, however, so he decided to dismiss the topic in favor of the situation at hand. What's happening on this mountain? The wolves weren't the only oddity. Surely he could sense it, leaving his body hair tense and ready to go into a fight or flight. Well, we've put some distance between us and the wolves. I'd say we gave them a slip, but Julian intended to invite the girl to the village, but she had already started walking. Hold on a minute, you should... Thanks for the help, but now that I've used this, I need to hurry, and I wouldn't have just been around here for fun. I'm meeting someone. The girl clasped a cylindrical trinket hanging from her neck, tempting Junan's eyes to observe it closely. He traced the strange symbols etched all along the thing, being a bit larger than a flute, and it brought to mind the sudden fog that had helped him escape the wolves. I know this is a strange question, but did you have anything to do with that fog? How about if we start with whether you're coming or going? I sure wouldn't mind having a target with me, so I won't say no if you are. She asked you to naturally following her without him realizing it. This had less to do with curiosity on his part and more to do with a need to see she was safe, an instinctive habit that was less helpful and more patronizing and unnecessary. We will see, he responded, though he still continued to accompany her. There was something about this girl, the way her calm demeanor felt more tightened and relaxed. To let him to believe she fell back into some kind of corner. Was this because of what happened so far, or what could stand to happen in the future? Mount Whiteground responded with silence to his inner musings. How much should I tell you? Croaked the girl as she looked down at the cylindrical trinket. It was more a statement than a genuine question. It was strange for her lips to remain tight. Jonan, for after he had already witnessed her gamble in the flesh, but there was no forcing it out of her if she wanted to remain silent as the mountain. How about we start with who you are? I'm Jonan Eisen. Jonan is fine. I'm a Matagi, like you said. His gaze dropped from her to the muscle in his hands. Well, I'm Sayu. She responded. Unlike Junan, her gaze remained fixed on him, her voice never lacking confidence. As for who I am, I'm a woodland wanderer. What is that? The name of your people? I've never heard of them before, but then maybe they're on a local. You already knew she was a foreigner, but it's absolutely confirmed that she was from somewhere far, far away. You're not really from anywhere. Every day we wander the woods and hills. You could say the journey itself is our home. Ah, so you're nomadic people then. Where are the rest of you? Something came up and I had to go solo for a bit. She stopped. The person I'm meeting is actually one of us. His fuse is short and he's a little too overprotective for his own good, so I'm not exactly jumping for joy over it. They then turned to look at Junan, awaiting his definitive response. Though she hasn't said it out loud, he knew that this was the point of going one way or the other for him. Did he want to make certain she was well and get more answers, or did he want to turn back and deem this as a passing meeting between odd strangers? Julian also slowed to a meek stop. What use could he be to her, really? He couldn't even say he was Matagi out loud, but someone so indecisive really proved to be of worth in whatever lay up ahead. She was in a hurry, Saya said, but she still waited patiently for a new companion to wrestle with his thoughts. Against his doubts, the desire to ensure her safety was slowly wearing out as it so often did, but the silence stretched as he failed to put anything into words. And this went on. There was a sudden shift in the winds coursing through them, the sign of a snowstorm on the horizon. I think, Jordan began before stopping himself short. Both he and Sayo felt the oncoming storm, only to realize it was no simple storm. It was a beast. The echoing and deepening roar they heard next made it clear something supernatural was drawing near, causing Junlan to draw in a sharp breath in surprise. He had felt its presence before. There was no way he could ever forget it. No way he could mistake that ferocity. It had been years since he saw the beast, but the very weight of its existence was enough to be carried by the wind. Saya's response was not one of surprise, but of action. She looked down at the cylindrical trinket, which seemed to pulsate with light as the beast's roar reached her ears. It's fascinating. I was right about this mountain. There was no need to answer out loud now. They both knew in that moment that they were after the same thing. After sharing an understanding glance, they took off running up a nearby hill, heading straight toward the invisible storm. The closer they edged into their target, the brighter Saya's trinket glowed. First the weird fog, and now this. Jonah thought toward the ever-glowing light. Just what is that thing, and why is it reacting to the beast? Why did an object from foreign land react to a local beast from his own past? His thoughts continued. I never thought I'd meet it again like this. I suppose Idios must have a plan in mind. After a few moments of a dead sprint, it appeared before them, dominating their field of view. Despite the tens of acres separating them, they could both feel the overwhelming wild force of its presence. It stood with the peak of Mount Whiteground behind it. Overlooking its surroundings, it formed the very image of a king surveying his domain. It was a giant bear, easily dwarfing any other mouse had ever seen, surrounded by a cloak of lightning. Every few moments, firework-like bursts of electricity would crackle off its blue-white fur to display the immense power pressurized within that was eager to surge without. The light given off by its flashes of power surrounded it like a halo, providing a contrast that emphasized every muscle, every sinew of its frame. I knew it was you, Jordan growled. That was the one, the beast that 5 years ago had changed the entire course of his life. Raiju. Chapter 4, Dual Threats. Fate can be strange. Fate can be fickle. And at times, fate can be irredeemably cruel. Guided by the girl, Junan found himself face to face with a living symbol of the laws of his people. The laws he loved but would be pain to lose. There was not a single person living on Mountain Whiteground who had not heard of Raiju. Since its first appearance 10 years prior, it had used its lightning to slaughter countless humans and animals, usurping the balance of power all throughout nature. Many Matagi rose to challenge it and were injured or fallen, with none so much as finding its lair. It's now lived as a symbol of destruction and greed, known to all as a true blight upon land. And now, here it was. Upon sight of this bear before him, the instincts he long sealed away were breaking through to the surface. It was an excitement that coursed through his muscles, through flesh, through bone, the carving for a rematch, and as he noticed, with the trembling of his fingers over his rivals, also a deep fear. His name is Raiju? Saya looked to Junlin, puzzled over the name, but her eyes started to shift nervously as the cylindrical trinket glowed bright. Up until then, he'd only seen her cool and calm. Now her eyes started back and forth with a mild panic between him, the trinket, and the bear. That's right. Don't tell me you came here looking for it. No, I knew there was a part of it here, but I didn't know it would manifest as a beast like this. Part? Something to do with the cylinder? The thing continued to light up in response to Raiju, shining brighter and brighter the closer it approached. Shonen couldn't quite wrap his mind around it. A part would indicate that once united, the beast and trinket become whole, but what kind of relationship could there be between a monstrous creature of nature and a man-made instrument? Just what is that cylinder? Raiju roared. Junlin, a flicker of exhilaration being elicited by the sound, cut himself off and turned his focus back on the beast. You're just itching for a fight, aren't you? It responded with a mighty leap from the rock it stood upon, diving toward them. Sparks erupted from its body with each print impressed into the ground. No, you're not the one it's calling to. Before Saya could explain, a spear of stone as tall as either of them darted from somewhere, whistling eerily through the air as it arced straight for Raiju. The beast stepped aside to miss the attack in an instant, but the spear held such thrust behind it that even the slight brush upon its side tore a hunk of hide from its flesh. A crimson stain began to bubble through its blue-white fur. The King of Thunder halted his advance, looking somewhere off in the distance before stepping backward with timorous hesitation. Then with a flash of light to cover its movements, it retreated back into the mountain. Damn you, I'm not missing this chance. Get back here! Julian cried, though he knew well it made the wisest choice to save its own life. Even still, having his unexpected rematch stolen away by an equally unexpected external force left him with a bitter taste in his mouth. Julian, look out! Whatever threat had chased Raiju off wasted no time in turning his attention toward them. Ducking his ear outside his warning, Julian watched the stone spear streak just over his head, hitting a splintering tree that was crawling right in front of him. What was that? I've never seen an art like that. He's coming, Sayu muttered in response. He? He woo. The two made their own retreat behind some nearby rocks. Sayu gripped the trinket around her neck, now weakened in its glow. Tighter than ever, as she explained, while he listened, Julian used a pair of binoculars on this person to scan where the spear had flown from in hopes of seeing who or what was behind them. He attacks woodland wanderers and steals the artifacts we collect, she started. I assure you, we won't be the first. He's murdered. He's a berserker who spreads destruction wherever he goes. But the binoculars revealed an unusual figure. He was tattooed with symbols on every surface of his skin, but his ears. Even his hair had similar patterns shaved into it. And as he stood, the playful smile on his lips betrayed no hint of the violent nature she was describing. No, that's underselling him. He's trying to murder every last one of us, and we don't even know who or what he is. However, it's the name we made up for him. Though far away, Jordan was met with the man's direct gaze. One 10 times sharper, 10 times hairier than his own. Even through the lens, he felt a bloodthirsty aura that pierced through him as well as any stone spear that could be thrown. It was terrifying. And as he absorbed his fear, the man disappeared from view. You call him the Oni, the demon. Julian put the binoculars down, seeing that the Oni now stood only a few dozen acres from their position. So the bear got away. No matter, there are times when business is better fit before pleasure. With some cue from his words, the rocks around the two exploded. He saw no blood-stained remains among the rubble, however. He merely smiled in appreciation of their abilities. The gunshot rang out immediately after it did nothing to change this. You found yourself in an intriguing bodyguard under the mouse. The shot aimed toward the Oni failed to ruffle him in the least. Fear nor hesitation traced his features, but a rather conflict between calmness toward the circumstances and a desirous hunger for violence. A rock wall effortlessly burst from the ground to block the bullet before it could reach it. I'm not interested in your weird rigs, Oni. You want to know who you are and why you are here. Junan and Zayo managed to only just evade the rocks exploding. Now Junan, hidden in a bank of rivered reeds, kept his fingers on the trigger as he barred their pursuers with questions. These, at which the man had blocked his shot, left him shaken, but he recovered control and put in brave front so as not to further shift the muzzle of his rival with anxious trembling. The more ferocious the opponent, the less you showed of them your back. That was one of the iron laws of the Matagi. I am the Storm Elder. I'd much prefer you call me that over that other unfortunate name you've given me. And why coming after Sayu? Why did you try to kill Raiju? And continued to fire questions, with the speed at which he reloaded and fired more bullets from his riddle, slowly adjusting himself to a position that would allow him to move instantaneously should he need to. I'm here to squeeze the life out of that little mouse and her whole mouse clan, if that isn't apparent enough. The death shall be an offering to another clan, and to see this mission of mine accomplished, I've been gifted power. My storm writing is this for no greater reason than what I speak. Lies, some of it at least. Juno could sense it as soon as the Oni opened his mouth, for it was in no way possible for the joy that split the man's face as he attacked Raichu to be under the guise of a mere mission. Yet he wondered if the Oni himself was unaware of how naked his desire for killing was throughout his deceptive answer. Still, there had to be a reason behind it. A real reason. That's all? Juno responded. Well, none of that sounds like a good enough reason to be on mountain, so get off. Even as he said it, Junan pressed down and let the next bullet fly, leaping straight toward the Oni. He slammed his right fist into the ground in response, and more masses of stone lifted from the earth to form a wall that shielded him. Perfect. Coaxing the Oni into creating a wall had been part of Junan's plan, moving to hide in the shadows of the wall. Junan used a moment to grip his Nagasa, a special hunting knife of the Matagi, to slide into the man's blind spot and strike. It would take more than that, little cub. Even as the light flashed off Junan's arching blade, he felt a sharp stab of pain through his body, leaving his consciousness to swim through naught but blackened agony. It wasn't until his back slammed into the ground, acres behind where he had been, that he saw the Oni's left hand was encased entirely in rock to form a heavy gauntlet. The blade found his mark. It's been a while since I was last scratched. The rock wall grumbled, revealing the Oni's twisted expression. He panted with excitement as the warm, live blood dropped liberally from the wound on his side. I pulled the trigger best, but I like a spark. You make a fine warp before I take down that bear. Yamatagi do love our powder tricks, Junan replied slyly. Sometimes we even like to use ourselves as decoys. As Oni moved to a closer distance between him and Junan, several bolts came raining down from above. He blocked them with the stones stirred up in his hand, but by the time he returned his eye to his opponent, he was gone. You blocked it too, huh? Too bad, but thanks anyway, Zayu. I should be the one thanking you. Now I've got proof his stone walls are in a perfect defense. That alone is worth its weight in money to me. After firing off another bolt to force more distance between them and the Oni, Zayu helped Junan to his feet, and the two stepped into the thick foliage nearby. Junan could see the foreign girl was back in control of her emotions. That was the only way she could have known to step in to strike without him saying a word. Looks like one of my most reliable relatives got to see the guy's weakness too. As he said this, she pointed up to a cliff in the direction they were heading. There, Junan got his first look at the one side intended to meet on the mountain. Chapter 5, Zayu's Fight. Junan followed Zayu's pointed finger toward a cliff that towered behind the Oni to see a man. Special delivery, Zayu. Your BFF has arrived. There's an annoying scrap voice. As the Oni's attention turned to the source of this new voice echoing through the mountain, the young man leaped from his place, the sun eclipsing his body with dark shadows that made it impossible to see his face. Junan could see that he was taller and leaner than him, and dressed in all furs, the hooded part further covering his wearer's face. But that was all he could surmise of him. Well, Junan supposed he could surmise one other thing. He knew how to fight. The Oni snored as he formed a disc-shaped buckler of stone to fend off the oncoming dropkick. Another damned mouse has come to nib at my toes. Come all you like, the number makes no difference to me. The young man, however, simply used his shield as a stepping stone to spring himself into the air a second time. Your bag's right home, scribble face. First whizzing into the air, he then landed behind the Oni and launched a flurry of punches at the towering sun, reddened back before him. The speed of these attacks made it feel as though his fist had multiplied to deliver a veritable storm of strikes. A fine effort, but it's nowhere near enough. The onslaught pushed the Oni back to stagger at most. He immediately straightened and kicked off the ground, soaring away and sounding a rock wall to cover his retreat. The young man halted in turn, jumping backward to put yet more distance between them. You just had to make a dramatic entrance, didn't you, doll? Sayu chided with a smirk. No way! Complete coincidence that I showed up just in the nick of time, Thou answered while dodging a counterattack from the Oni. Showing them an unperturbed smile as he did so, he then added, I'll say though, I'm glad I showed up when I did. Got to see something very interesting. Jordan had no trouble guessing to what he was referring. It was the idea of using their villain's rock walls to step in his blind spots, just as he had done with his Nagasa. As I put it, these earthen walls were not the perfect defense they were made out to be on the surface. But Dao had also noticed something else. And I don't just mean the blind spots you're exploiting. I mean that those walls don't just come out instinctively when he needs them. Yeah, if you take advantage of that, he is as good as done, exclaimed Sayu. She then whistled, turning her relative's attention toward her as she made some sort of shorthanded signal. The young man's hood bent forward as he nodded in turn, and then immediately he began launching sporadically timed attacks to demand the Oni's attention. It's almost like you two share a mind, Children observed. Guess he was worth meeting up with after all. Tell me about it, she agreed. Okay, Children, let's move out. So I guided Children into a nearby hill that overlooked a snow-covered slope. Atop this was a giant lump of ice, balanced uncertainly with an avalanche worth of snow built up behind it as the frozen shape snatched the moisture from the area surrounding it. Thou intended to slowly lead the Oni to this very slope. Children questions this plan with a raised eyebrow. I get a plan, but he's not stupid enough to fall for such an obvious trap, is he? She returned the question with a cheeky smile and held up the cylindrical trinket to his face to answer his questions. No sense in me hiding what it can do to you now. I'm going to go get things ready. You just wait for my signal. You'll know exactly where to shoot. I'm sure I will. Jordan looked through his binoculars at the point Sayu implied, then put down and muttered to himself what an abomination this was a man of the mountain while fixing the scope of his muzzle loader. At the same time, Dao continued drawing the Oni into their desired point in a merry chase consisting of attacking and retreating again. I admire the way you suggest bringing to life, Mouse, the Oni crowed, swinging a stone fist with a winning man's wild energy. It appeared he hadn't noticed his prey was intentionally leading him elsewhere. But I got tired of playing with you. Oblivion will suit you well, and now come here. Impatience building. He wrapped a massive wealth of stone around his hand. Then had loose a single punch filled with murderous intent, unlike any of the previous. A direct hit from such a blow would have been more than any human body could bear. Yet in the next instant, the Oni's tattooed face twisted with perplexity. His tightened fist was not, as he expected, wrapped by a corpse, while it was swathed in the fur the young man had been wearing. We call that the molding, see? I got some tricks up my sleeve too. Having shed his fur garments, Dao flipped through the air, a broken smirk on his now revealed face. A handsome one with close-cropped, dark blue hair. Welcome, though he certainly was, there was no doubting the wild air that accompanied it. His every gesture was leafy, feral, and free. Continue this game with your scrambling all you like, the Oni snarled. By the end of it, you will still be smeared across this mountain. He aimed his next strike toward the ground, controlling the fragments of stone that rose from it. He swung them toward Dao, bathing the young man in a merciless storm of shrapnel. Dao continued to move backward despite being padded from head to toe, his movements keeping the damage done to a minimum as he maintained a safe distance between himself and his oncoming foe. His scare was in fact one of the signals to his two allies that he only had arrived at the right spot for a full-on assault. Now fully engrossed by the shift in Dao's tactics, they only had no time to wonder where the three bolts from a crossbow that flew over his head in the moment. "Junan! Ready?" Junan replied to Sayu. His weapon scope was fixed on a small chunk of ice with frozen stalactite hanging from its belly. A second later, fire spat from Junan's muzzleloader, the bullet biting into this most vulnerable chunk, the point destroyed. The weight it supported was now too much to bear, forcing a massive amount of ice to begin collapsing inward on itself as it threatened to hurtle down the slope. As if to follow the lead of the crumbling ice, a range of snow covering the face of the slope followed. No simple landslide would have been a threat to the Oni and to his powerful experience, but its mighty force would be like a beast the size of the mountain itself, shedding its wintry coat. Junan could see light dancing through the fog blazes along the incline, the three exact locations where Sayu had shot her bolts. The slope began to tremble with greater force. The moment the light and fog given off by the bolts faded, the earthly truly awakened with a terrifying moan. The ice and snow at the top of the slope now fully collapsed and then rumbled down the mountain with a speed in which nothing could escape. "Ha!" the Oni cried with amusement. "An interesting gambit, but you'll..." The monster of a man had no time for retorts, but he realized this too late. Before he could finish his sentence, the avalanche had rushed downwards to swallow his legs, the bit around him increasing at far too great a speed for him to summon a new wall of stone to protect him. Cold, woolly, violent waves continued to crash into him, engulfing his form until even his ripened tattoos were buried beneath the silvery white rifts. By the end of it, he had been completely entombed beneath ice and snow. "Did you get him?" Julian called out. So I shook her head. "I doubt it will kill a guy like him, but I don't think he will be getting out anytime soon." "Great! 2 immortal even for an avalanche. Just how did you manage to pull off one of that size?" We're still in awe of just what they had accomplished with a few bolts and a bullet, but the cause versus the effect was still on a seemingly inconceivable scale. Adjusted the moisture along the slope and made conditions ideal for the snow to slide, answered Sayu as she removed the trinket from a custom slot in her crossbow, returning it to her neck. Each bolt's end had been infused with a kind of energy from it before being fired, and Shuna now realized that they retained this connective energy even after being fired off a good distance away. "So that the cylinder was the key, huh? Figures," Shuna muttered. "The Oni was after it too, but even still, I can't believe it has the power to adjust the moisture of the whole face." Julian's need for answers was now at its peak. If there was some kind of paranormal event behind it all, perhaps understanding it would help him learn more about the mysterious origins behind Raiju. "Other girls, are you? Your plan got him in one. You're good though, right? Not hurt anywhere?" Hurried over to the two of them, rattling off the questions and commentary once close enough through a combed leaf that stuck out of his mouth. His hair may have been a different color from his relatives, but the clothing had similar patterns, and his tan skin held the same natural shade. He, however, had opted to paint over his in a way that very much stood out. "I'm fine. I was more worried about you, though. Just where were you?" "Oh, sorry about that," he replied with a smile. "I actually stopped by a village near here to gather some info first. Some luck though, huh? First some wolves were running wild, then the Oni showed up, but it should be behind us now. Still," Dot would sigh by the shoulders, enfolding her securely in his arms as he fixed Junan with his gaze. "You're a local? A hunter maybe? Thanks for helping us, are you?" "Should be the one saying thanks," Junan replied. "You're Dao, I think it was. You're Zaya's, what, brother?" "Close enough. You're technically cousins, but you may as well be brother and sister. And you might have heard of me. Tornado Dao, ring a bell?" "It sure doesn't, but it's a pleasure." Junan offered his hand, which Dao took. Dao's other hand was off the side with Sayu, preventing the stranger he only just met from getting too close to her. Jordan followed up. Well, I've got an awful lot of questions after all this, but we can save that for once we're not outside. The weather's only going to get worse tonight. He then looked up at the sky, watching as the wind carried clouds of snow. To him, it said the spirits of the mountain had seen the whole affair, and they were in a frightful rage over it. Chapter 6. Thus spoke a woodland wanderer. Nestled in the northeastern corner of the Sumerian continent loomed Mount Whitegram, its body played mother to a richly unique culture and ecosystem. But although loved deeply by the people who made her their home, she was not merciful in turn. The many mysteries and phenomena she held seen as events worthy of worship for some, while fables worthy of dismissal for others made it life very difficult indeed. But still, they continued to live on in her embrace, accepting that this was and would always be her way. There were those who insisted there was a connection between the stories of the mountain and the mysterious disappearance of the greatest Matagi who ever lived, Kiyun. Kiyun Orcus. It was on this day that Chunan was about to come face to face with the truth behind his long-sunk tale through a thread looming in the shadows, all while discovering something more about himself than he ever thought possible. And all through the words of someone who came from somewhere far away. So that weird little thing is called a cylinder of the frozen sky. I've actually seen an artifact before. As the sun set, Mount Whiteground wailed as the wind and snow kicked up to bid these new invaders unwelcome. They had to move quickly, which is why the three of them, Junan, Sayu and Dao, now huddled around the campfire in a small cave, the blizzard raging on just acres away. Dao, who had lost his fur coat during their lively encounter, had taken to piling liberal amounts of wood into the fire. According to the foreigners, the cylinder of the frozen sky was capable of adjusting the concentration of moisture in the air or even controlling the weather within a certain radius. Did make quick work of the mystery of how she was able to create far from seeming nothing or banish snowstorms with a flicker of a light. As also how you were able to cause an avalanche that huge, Julian asked, though he knew the answer already. Here, concentrated its power into bolts and adjusted the moisture of the snow where the bolts landed. If you know how it works, it links up well enough with weapons. Oh, well enough? You make it sound like it's not something beyond belief. I almost still don't believe it. Joanne's surprise wasn't just at the artifact, but at a series of events that had occurred in unbelievable succession. The whole day had succeeded in astounding him utterly, from the nomadic tribe responsible for this artifact in hand to the man who handled them with an expression of malicious thrill. And how did this girl seem to know so much about the world, so much he didn't know? He had never experienced the things she seemed so indifferent to in all his years on the mountain, and with that in mind, he further wondered if these were the kinds of things his old friends who left the village were now experiencing on their journeys. Realizing how little he knew about the outside world startled him in one sense, but in another it left him curious for more revelations. Dao gave a warm laugh as he wrapped his arms around her shoulders to pull in as he had done before. Is she something else? Doesn't matter how bad the situation gets, she can always think up a way out. Dao, we have talked about this, Saya whined as she shrugged him off. Even the small interplay between the two that had no doubt happened countless times before felt like something that had come from another world entirely. Their every word, their every interaction served to overwhelm Chunla, making him realize just how small his existence truly was, drawing his spirit more than even the mountain that rose high above them. But his loyalty to the mountain remained even in the bizarre enlightened befuddlement. He was a Matagi, and through that, the weight of the situation was twice so inspiring him to rise to action and stop the incoming threat from encroaching upon the small world further. It's so hard to wrap my head around it all, but are you planning to get that part he mentioned back from Raiju? Junan pushed the discussion forward, not just to cover the earthling conflict within, but to provide himself some direction. He needed to know precisely where to go in order to discover the role he would have to play in the reality unfolding before him. Yeah, confirmed Sayu. It needs to be complete so we can offer it at the shrine, and once it's complete, it should give us the power we need to take down Dione for good. She went on to say that they had known the part needed was on Mount Whiteground, but until she saw it, she wasn't aware that it had fused with indigenous life. It had changed nothing, for they had to retrieve it, used or free. This new direction failed to anger him as he hoped. He met the fated beastly rival he hadn't seen in years, only due to the influence of outsiders who revealed to him what gave the beast its legendary status. It was nothing he could have possibly predicted. It came with the strange sensation, one he wouldn't quite be able to put into words if prompted, that his past had run off without him, morphing and distorting under the watchful eyes of others till it was no longer a narrative to call his own. Even if he had to be the one to confront it in the present. He continued on, it was all he could do. Right, it only is an entirely different problem. With Raiju, at least, there was a tangible connection, distorted as it was now. He cemented these implausible circumstances in reality. The only though made him feel as though he had been thrust right back into the realm of fantasy. They could not afford to let that monster of a man remain the dominant party between them. Taking up his rifle, Chun inversely stepped away from the fire, turning toward the entrance of which there was only a swirling vortex of night sky and icy snow. We headed off to all of a sudden. Dao stood and reached out to Junnan, gripping his shoulder to stop him in his tracks. I can't let Dione kill Raiju, so I need to hunt it down before he rises from the snow. It would be a disaster if he snatched that part before we could get it. When he turned to answer them, he was met with two unexpected expressions. Expressions one normally wouldn't present in the face of someone readying themselves for a fight to the death. He was smiling. Expected though they were, he found comfort in that being their natural reaction. Dara answered, "Well, then we're on the same boat. Wouldn't hurt to bring along someone like me if you are open to having a partner help you race Dione to the finishing line. I'll tell you, I got a mean kick. And since Raiju has a part of the artifact inside, we both should know our way around it." Sayu added. "I doubt either of us would slow you down." Both of them were right. There was no good reason for Junan to be so possessive over this hunt, and there was no greater recipe for seeing it to its success than cooperating with two who may know the beast better than he ever thought he did. "I don't doubt it," Junan responded, "but the King of the Thunder and I have a history. Why was he being so stubborn about it? Group hunts were a Matagi tradition, so they were more than familiar to him. But here he was, impatiently eager to rush ahead on his own. A part of him was embarrassed by his confusion, when direction were among the few things in this moment rooted in coherence. "Why do you want to go alone?" Sayu asked. "How come nothing seemed to shake you?" Junan responded with a question of his own. Again, he hoped the answer would anger him in some way, push him in the right sound direction that would help him feel it with the ease they did. So I answered without hesitation, "Because my goal has an end with meaning, not just to our people as a whole, but to me as a person, so all that's left to do is achieve it." Makes sense? It didn't. He didn't know anything about what truly drove her or what gave this mission of hers such meaning that it drowned out all hesitation. But he could at least, how invisible, how intangible it was, feel a foundational strength in an answer that brought him comfort. Dao sought to comfort him in another way. "Don't think too hard about it. Sayu is an unusual one. Even I have trouble understanding her sometimes. For now, let's just boil it down to us wanting to have you back in a fight. They're good enough." Between the talk, Dao had retrieved some things to prepare fighting back out before returning to Junan's side to clap him encouragingly on the shoulder. "Yeah, good enough for now." At the time, Jordan was still unaware that the very thing causing his heart to hesitate was also calling up a memory buried deep within. Chapter 7. One people, one purpose. Saya could barely see Jordan's back in front of her. The snow clouds above were thick enough to obscure the moon, and the wind blew hard enough to drive fragments of icy snow into the even tiniest gaps of the clothing. The drifts fighting on the ground were now up to their knees, sapping their strength with every step. February's on Mount Wide ground meant that blizzards struck with the ferocity of a temple guard, repelling any who dared to trespass on the sanctuary. And the years had only made them more violent. The Matagi took this as a sign that the mountain spirits were angry at humanity for desecrating the blessing bestowed upon them by Adios. It would be easy to dismiss this as superstition, but the way in which the mountain swallowed up its prey in snow bordered on unnatural. Even the sound of each blizzard's fury was enough to drown out the most primal of screams for help, making rescue a fool's dream. In Mount Wide Ground's most recent display of rage, a single point of light marched through. It consisted of 3 travelers speaking volumes at their peak to only just hear one another. Damn, it's cold out here. Sure, I was an idiot for losing my first. Achoo! Want to trade cold, Star? Don't be silly, Zion. No, I'd let you catch a cold. I got close to rub me down and warm me up, so I'm doing fine. Jordan led the way with Zion Dal, trusting the light of his lamp to guide their steps. Trusting the light of his lamp. Unread dressed appropriately for such an environment, Jordan had given his coat to Sayu, leaving with a thick, though not quite thick enough sweater to battle the elements. Sayu was still woefully underdressed, even with the coat, but she was still much better off than Dao, who had fashioned a pitiful covering by cutting armholes into a hempen bag. Wow. There's a Matagi lodge just up ahead, Junan urged. Just hang in there. The only thing that inspired them to continue this terrible trek was that the route itself was short. Though the foreigners had no defense against the cold, they knew, as woodland wanderers would, how to navigate uneven terrain well. It was only by this knowledge that helped them conserve the valuable energy needed to keep up with the natives of the land. They reached the cabin around midnight. I almost don't know how we made it through that, Jordan heaved with relief as they entered. We've got time to rest if you need, though it probably won't be too comfortable. The cabin had been constructed as a supply stop for those climbing the mountain rather than as any formal lodging, consisting of a single room that ground with every push of the winds outside. It did so even as Chunan opened the door. He could feel the vibrations of its planks, even with his gloves. Yet the ramshackle that appeared on the surface remained firm in its foundation, indicating it was regularly cared for. Chunan's mind wanted to Raiju once they were indoors. He imagined that, based on the direction it had gone when fleeing the Oni, it was likely hiding somewhere near the summit. Then up with what he already knew of the beast. One had found its lair in the areas inhabited by other bears, and the area in question showed evidence of lightning damage. The best course of action, if they were to find it, was to resupply and strike out quickly to reach the summit by dawn. Churan turned to his companions. There's more stuff left here than I was expecting. Take whatever you can carry. So you can shove a short blade in this wooden hollow thing and make it into a spear, Dao observed one of the weapons among the stock. That's called Fukuru Nagasa, Chunan explained. It's an offshoot of the knife I have with me. While I was busy gathering anything that was vital to their survival, Saya took a look at the hunting gear and specialized equipment in the farther corner of the cabin. She was quietly curious about her surroundings, both from the simple innocent perspective and from a deeply intellectual perspective. Oh yes, fur! Where have you been all of my life, you beautiful bastard? Dao, on the other hand, dived into the supplies with abandon, eventually caressing and curling up among a pile of warm furs. There was a fire pit in the center of the room. Like you approached, looks like you've got an ear already too. I'll go ahead and get a fire going. Thanks. Wait, where did you learn that word? Junan was puzzled as he continued sorting through supplies. It was already strange enough that you pegged me as a Matagi at all. I learned it already from this book, she responded, removing a book from the pouch at her waist. And the traveler who gave it to me was a Matagi, the same person I told you about before. It was the book she had been so particular about when they first met, entitled Fundamentals of Indigenous Cultures. Junan found that binding was quite aged when he took it into his hand and flipped through it, but it still held up very well over the years. Oh, this book is over 25 years old. The information would have been out of date to more modernized cultures, but all that was written on the Matagi was still very relevant, making it all the more apparent to him that their lives had not changed with the passing of time. The book contained the names, lifestyles, and beliefs of various cultures and ethnicities Jordan had never heard of before, as well as objective insights from the author, adding a beating heart behind its logical browse. Sayu and Dao's people, the Woodland Wanderers, were also mentioned. I found your people, Jordan said, reading on with interest. You sound like a pretty peaceful group the way you were written here. He wondered again how the Woodland Wanderers had such a rare artifact in their possession, and why they were guarding it, though most of that had been answered at full volume during their windy trek. The Woodland Wanderers had an agreement with the Septian Church. They would collect any artifacts the Church's people could not reach, and in exchange they were given the freedom to use them at their discretion, indulging in their many benefits before handing them over to the Church at the designated shrines. The book itself only gave vague hints as to this part of their background. Instead, it was full of excerpts on how they supported themselves with woodcrafts and assisted merchants during peaceful times, as well as bringing with notes detailing their relationships with other cultures and their day-to-day aesthetics. I doubt anything written here is new to you, but the book itself is special, Jonan guessed. That's right, I'm only here today because of it and the person who gave it to me, Sayu answered. You might say he and it are motivation. It must be nice to be motivated by something. For me, it's more... Both she and Dao had found their own purposes in the ways of their people. Sayu in particular held a deep faith in heritage, and that was key in her reasoning for being on this mountain. Junan failed to resonate with that even now. What was he on this mountain for? What inspired him to be here in this moment? No matter how far he looked within, all he could see was a deep, unending emptiness. It's fine if you can't relate. Dao's voice snapped him out of the meditation. It was longer than he intended. Now back to his senses, Junan looked to see the young man now stretched out over straw and Sayu crouching in front of the Iloli. Sayu's the only bookworm we've got, so even to us, she just sees the whole world differently. Sayu's bigger perspective has helped me find my way more than a few times. Dao continued, standing to give Junan a charitable pat on the shoulder. So I get what you're going through, but you don't have to be set on something like her or have any deep meaning in what you're doing right now if it's just not there. If you can't think of anything that motivates you, just do whatever you're doing now, and maybe in time that motivation will find you. Yeah, you're right. Junan was moved by words that were precisely what he needed in the moment to ground him. For now, all we can do is what we were planning to do anyway. Keep moving. He did not know when he would be free of the chains of uncertainty he found himself wrestling with. What he did know was that something had changed about the uncertainty itself, and his new companions were the catalyst to the change. Perhaps this would further lead to something, perhaps even lead to the same exact thing that birthed motivation in them. The silence between conversations as they watched the quietly flickering fire had been deafened by the wailing winds outside, but as the fire grew, so did its voice, and Junan began to think that even through a blizzard too great for words was still a straight, clear path. Chapter 8. In the depths of his memories. Listen, Junan, before we go after Raichu, there's something I want to say, began the young boy's father. We Matagi follow the ways of our people. In doing that, we respect this mountain and stand watch over it for its beasts. Do you know why we do that? It's not the first time he asked it. In fact, he had asked it countless times, but never had he asked it why they were on the way to slay beasts when even Q and Orcus had failed. Vernon asked why his father, the current chief in the legendary hunter's absence, would bring it up now. Jonah repeated his usual answer. His father never asked anything without a reason, so the answer would come with time. The blessings of the Mons are the blessings of ideas. We protect them so as to show our thanks to her. That's right, we believe this and we aren't wrong for it. But I think we have a greater purpose than even that answer. I want you to ponder what it is as we hunt Raiju. So what does the old answer mean? You've been full of it all this time? His father laughed. Sorry, Jonan, I meant to save this conversation for after you'd become a man. But here you are, hunting Raiju with me. It makes for a fine opportunity. The lesson continued as they ascended the mountain and were soon near the midpoint of Mount White Ground, an area where bears were known to live. No one knew where Raiju made its nest, so the only options in tracking it was to go to where it was last seen and hope there were tracks to follow. We're able to see tomorrow because we take the lives of other creatures. These creatures are no different. They fight to survive, and sometimes that means hunting us as we hunt them. In Raiju, as it casts its monstrous shadow over the whole of this mountain, is no exception. Right, John responded pensively. After 20 years of hunting with Q and Orcus, I came to a realization. We are on equal footing with the beasts. We may not be able to see eye to eye with them, but we understand that we face life as they do. We face life? Okay, so what does that mean? John was familiar with the concept of giving thanks to life and taking it, but there was something extra about the concept of facing it. He was also not the best at wrapping his mind around the philosophical, preferring straightforward paths with simple, direct answers. Anything that's straight beyond the risk him getting lost in his own thoughts. I don't think there's a single answer to that question. The journey to try and find your own answer is as important as the answer itself. Without a journey, life cannot be faced. It would be meaningless. Meaningless? That's right. Face life, accept it. Your struggles will reveal guideposts on your journey that only you can see. Young Shonen thought about the obstacles on the path that made his life. At the same time, he considered the lives of others who had chosen different paths, wondering what their answers came to be through it all. Had those who left the village run away from ways of the people, or had they chosen to leave after finding something that gave their lives meaning? But what was the meaning in becoming poachers or trophy hunters for the nobility? He doubted it. This is going over my head, he finally admitted. Knowing that is a victory in itself, why it blinds us from our correct path. A gentle expression sat on his father's face. There were moments when he was deeply stern, but for now, as he presented his son a question, even those twice and thrice his age would wrestle with, he presented his softest side. What does this have to do with Raiju? Junin asked. I'm sure you already know this, but the hunt for Raiju is a dangerous one. The sound of their footfalls on the snow halted. Junin's father used a pause to give his son time to consider the reason behind the talk. What I'm saying is that we might end up as the ones being hunted this time, he continued. The risk of us losing our lives is higher than any normal hunt. Perhaps the odds are even against us. Do you understand what could happen, Junin? Without any response. He understood well, but he didn't want to put it into words. Accept reality, even if this hunt doesn't end the way we wanted to. Though I thought this might be my last chance to tell you that. In a short life, he had come to have a very simple dream. Hunt Raiju with his father, protect the mountain, and suppress Kyun. It was a way he would show the other vagabonds youths his age that there was meaning in the path they had not chosen. So how did this new course of thought his father proposed fit into this dream? Was it a new one that deviated entirely, failing to fit the curated mold of the path he chose to walk? The answers did not matter. It was not long until Junin lost it all, his dream and his father. What he found among the broken pieces of his life that came afterward was not any true answer to his father's question, but rather a realization that he, indeed, could not accept reality, leaving only a festering hatred in his heart. The rising sun stained the snow atop Mount Wildground with his subtle gold, and the lone Matagi and the two woodland wanderers carried more than their weight in supplies as they continued to heave and climb. The blizzard itself has blown over, but strong gusts continue to persist, bringing with it sheets of snow in what may as well have been the same thing. Each sheet reflected the morning glow, making them feel as though they were being assailed by brilliant motes of pure light. As planned, they arrived at the summit just as dawn was breaking. Their speed was aided by the fact that woodland wanderers were light on their feet even when weighed down by seemingly endless amounts of gear. Now that they were dressed properly for the weather, they could tackle the cold with a speed that put even a local to shame. But they still knew nothing about Raichu's location beyond it being somewhere within the vicinity. It was unclear whether they could first scout the place out, planning their next move carefully, or if they should strike as soon as they caught sight of the beast. Julian and Sayu continued to discuss options as they moved. No matter how he tried, Julian could not calm himself down. It had nothing to do with doubts in his or his companion's abilities. It was that the yet-to-be-seen foe they were hunting had the kind of strength that made even the most thorough of plans seem insufficient. "You're finally going to have the last part. It's been divided for so long." "Right?" Though chimed in agreement with Sayu's musing. "And if things go smooth enough, we might even finish up that bastard who keeps tailing us. We'll finally be able to face all the people he killed. I'm kind of excited to see what it does when it's completed. The Blade of the Thunder Heavens sure makes it sound like it will be impressive to me." "Well," began Junan writing, "the only will be the perfect test subject once you find out, won't he?" I saw you no doubt were particularly distracted by the suggestion. They remained focused, their eyes looking straight ahead, with no immediate dangers on their mind to stay in the way of the goal. In Sayu's case, retrieving the last part of the cylindrical artifact was not optimism, but the next step that was simply going to be. The woodland wanderers and the values they acquire from their tight-knit environment fascinated him. On the surface, their traditions were simple. They patrolled the eastern side of the continent, retrieved artifacts, and passed them along to the Septine Church. Yet each cycle of this journey was rooted with value and supplemented by countless customs that had long been passed down from generation to generation. Even as Sayu and Dao made slight deviations from their people's path, they balanced it by continuing to respect and adhere to their many traditions and values they had long loved and accepted. What did he value? As he observed them, Junan thought back to the days when his fathers were still alive. And he had a simple, pure goal. When he had that goal, he never felt a moment's resistance against the way of the Matagi. "What do I have now?" he wondered aloud. His purpose was shattered, leaving behind a constant feeling of questioning the nature of life itself in a puzzle he was no closer to solving now as he was then. The only thing sustaining Julian through his days was that it was natural for the body to breathe, eat, and sleep. Meeting these two was an outlier to his daily routine, and one that sparked something in him he had not felt in a long, long time. Could these strangers who possessed what he lacked lead him to reunite with that feeling of having a purpose in life? "Look out!" Dao shouted, snapped Junan back to his senses. In an instant, he felt a light jolt and something impact his body. "Dao!" cried Sayu. Dao shoved both Junan and Sayu aside, and a heartbeat later, a lightning flash and an explosion near him. Something struck the youth like an invisible wall, throwing him to the ground, and smoke rose from his skin as convulsion coursed through his body. It was the worst possible outcome among their discussed options. Raichu had attacked first. "Dao, are you alright?" "Yeah, I'm just glad you're okay, Sayu," Dao groped. "My body's numb, but Granny Haku's charm is nothing to sniff at. I think I can even stand." So I realized and had vocalized the paint he had carving his body was a board that must have been an insulating resin. After confirming that Dao was well and calm, Julian retrieved his binoculars. "Sorry, Dao, I let my guard down," he said. Don't worry about it. Even if you noticed, you might not have been able to dodge it. Just focus on finding it. He wasn't about to make the same mistake twice. He knew if the King of Thunder could see them, then they could see it as well. There, he found his long-time nemesis. It was a fitting frown for the conqueror of the land, and the wielder of the lightning through its very claws, as the highest peak of Mount Whiteground, looking down at them, was Raichu. Chapter 9, at the appointed hour. Over there, see? That's where the avalanche occurred. What a mess. How come they've been happening all over lately? The blizzard was over, and the morning sun was shedding light upon the fresh powder of snow along Mount Whiteground. Observing this, as they climbed through one of the mountain's trails, were two men wearing puzzled expressions. One tall and thin, the other short and stout. Both were the very picture of traditional Matagi in their straw hats and coats, each wielded a spear and hunting rifle. That there was an avalanche in itself was not surprising. They happened often, yet being so used to them was also why the locals were keenly aware that something was off about this one in particular. They could fast recognize impurities that threatened the mountain, and right now this event was quite impure. Their steps hastened as they approached the side of the avalanche. Even from a distance, seeing how unnatural it looked only heightened their unease. The Chunan was talking to the chief yesterday. The stout Matagi piped up. Have you seen him around here since then? I know he runs around here sometimes. Chunan wasn't known for late night hunts, but none had caught sight of him since the day before. It was another factor of the scene that unsettled them. He learned his ways from the man trained by Kyung. I think he will be alright. Reassured the Finn Matagi. Though I get why you're worried. Boy's had a lot on his mind. If that's where did you ever come into blame at Hunt? He turned down the chief's offer again. I don't blame him with how things went with his father, but at the same time, our kids surely do have it rough. To the fair for Chunnan, they also couldn't treat it as though it had nothing to do with them. Their youth were leaving the village one after another, and not just that they were struggling with the concept of what it meant to be a Matagi. It was this that had put their people in the dwindling position they were now in. Got word there was strange lightning to be seen on the mountain last night. Do you think Chunnan meant to get revenge on Raichu? They floated more questions and speculations between one another as they arrived inside, starting with the Tin Matagi. This was no natural avalanche, but then who did? Could have been Raichu. I know it's a piece of thunder, but there's got to be more to this we aren't seeing. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. I'm just worried about Junlan. They had no idea what imaginable threat from another land was awakening beneath the snow. Junan, Raichu, the name of the boy who buried me, and the name of my prey. Beneath snow and ice, the being only pondered inwardly the names of the two Matagi were speaking of. And the more he pondered, the more of a power inside of him ignited. Who could hear the sound of thunder and the echoes of those names he now hated and hungered more, birthing the perfect catalyst to reawaken the rage that fueled his every waking moment. Look, what's that light? Is there something beneath the snow? As these fires continued to burn brighter and brighter within Dione, his flesh began to quiver with the need to hunt. The terrifying light once more glowed through the patterns inked across his body. Junan, Mouse, Raichu, Junan, Mouse, Raichu. Dione awakened as his burning emotions pushed through his sensory threshold. Steam erupted from the snow like a geyser, revealing his body enveloped in a mysterious light and starting the two Matagi. Someone came out of the snow. I've never seen anything like this. Is it a monster? The men, despite all their experience, were struck with a fear that had left them falling on their behinds and waiting before the creature that appeared from a bed of steam and ice. They only sped to a glance as their mouths sang the gape. Chunan, the mouse, and Raichu, where are they? You know Chunan and Raichu? Cried the thin man. He worked to regain control of his senses once they heard the man speak. He then leveled his hunting rifle toward the Oni. Chunan and Raichu are the perfect prey for me. As for you two, you do as an appetizer. I don't know what you mean by that, the man Steve, but if you plan to harm someone from our village, then you are impurity of this mountain, now get. He then fired as his stout companion returned to his feet and aimed his spear, but there was no hope for the bullet reaching the Oni. In an instant, it had been blocked by an earthen wall, vanishing in a spray of harmless sparks. Where did rock come from? The Matagi cried. This man, he really is a monster. How did a thing like him manage to get so close to the village? Before the eyes of the Matagi, now once again overwhelmed with terror, the wall cracked and crumbled to the ground. It did not appear as though it was the owner's intention to do this, but it had at least fulfilled its purpose of shielding him from the bullet. It appeared I have not fully recovered, a trifling issue, he resolved with a brutal level tone. I have a small feast right here to warm me up before I hand him down. The Oni did not hesitate to feed his disadvantage into his hunger for violence, soaring the flames of his fighting spirit till it became a full rage for the hapless man. With it, he summoned a spear of stone. What is he? Is this the curse of the mountain? Who's have together? If you don't stop him, think of what will happen to the village. He only crept closer to them, making the dim red light growing from him dance before their eyes. Despite his crude mate, the spear in his hand seemed vicious enough to end their lives in an instant. All they could think of this man before them was that he must have been a demon from Gehenna. The morning air of Mount Wygram would have split with the sound of a useless gunshot and the wild shrieks of death were it not for the roaring wind. The feeling of impending disaster caressed Trunan's neck as they neared in a cave at the summit to keep out of Raichu's sight. It had nothing to do with the bear he was facing now. Something else now violated the mountain. Something's got his bruise of the mountain in an uproar, he muttered. I feel it too, replied Sayo. I've felt his presence plenty of times before. To the trio found Raichu, they were in no position to implement the plans they conjured along the way, knowing that the Oni was awake and likely to have toward them added insult to injury. He's already up, cried Dao in surprise. We're running out of time. Juno nodded. Yeah, we have to take down Raichu before he arrives. No way am I letting him steal this kill from me. He didn't know how long it would take the now free demon in his skin to pursue him to the summit, meaning every second, the battling, breathing, even thinking was a second wasted in an unknown countdown. It could take days, it could take hours. You're going to have to be quick about it, no distractions. Alright, there's no time to go back to the cabin and think more on what to do next. Jonah agreed, reviewing the goods they carried with them from the cabin. They were all limited in their functions, but some were indeed brought as countermeasures against the Raichu's incredible power. The question was, would they be enough to stay them from the jaws of death or defeat? It was time for Junin to put his knowledge as a Mataki to the test. It was a strategy he had been wondering for years how to apply in his own life, a strategy he had not used for years, a strategy that he left behind the day of his father's death. I think I've got a plan, he started. Have you heard of the Makigari tactic? Makigari was a group hunting tactic that was deeply rooted in Matagi tradition. In essence, it involved one or multiple members acting as guides, Seku, to surround it to prevent escape. An aggressive offense would then be utilized to lead it to a specific spot, where the sniper, the Bupa, would finish off the cornered beast. It was a tactic generally carried out by those who had long hunted together, as it hinged heavily on both the leadership of whoever headed the hunt and the implicit trust between the rest of the team. It was a difficult tactic to pull off even then, and yet it had to work with Trunan's new companions. Got an idea, replied Dao. Trunan explained in detail what it was before following up with a personal anecdote. It's a way we hunt. Me and my dad tried it with Raichu a long time ago. We actually had one over it back then, but, well, this time we are much better equipped and we are up one person. I think we can make it work. The reality was more that not a single other tactic came to mind. Trunan was deeply concerned about the ability to coordinate. Even if he had enough confidence in his own skills to compensate, it would be difficult to sync up with Sayu and Dao on a technical level. Could them being raised in completely different cultures change things too drastically for it to work? Sounds good, Trunan, let's go with that. Sayu was surprisingly quick to voice agreement to the plan. So we've got the traditional methods of the Matagi, an artifact, and fun-proof equipment to work with then. Up to now, Saya had been a thinker, a logical individual. Junan fully expected to reject the idea and propose something of her own. The surprise must have shown on his face as he continued. It's not impossible, we just need to minimize any quirks we have that might impact our cooperation and cover the rest with the equipment. One person's problem to solve is everyone's problem to solve here. This encouragement came with a smile. And no surprise, Junan supposed. She believed in this tactic more than he did. She was right, of course. But both sides were in the same awkward position of having to find out how the other one worked in a short time. She was also right that this could be solved by derailing just slightly from the traditional form of the tactic and utilizing the things they had, the equipment and the artifact, to cover their shortcomings. The vagabond told me, hit the unexpected with the unexpected, she said. Certainly they were doing just that. Alright, Dao piped out cheerfully. If you've got your endorsement, sire, then I don't see any reason not to back it up. He then chided Chunlin playfully about having more faith in his own plan, for no plan goes well when his opposer lacks proper faith in it. Dao must have accompanied Chunlin's expression of surprise for him to say it. Dao was more brawn than brain, but he was very perceptive of others' emotions, meaning he knew exactly what to say to have someone who was wavering at the time. The chiding was just what Chunlin needed. You're both right, he said. You just as caught up in me, so I'm going to put my trust in this plan and you know about doubt as to whether this will work. It was time to execute their very own brand of Makigari tactic. Und da ich jetzt schon merke, dass meine halt bestimmte Probleme mache, dadurch, dass ich halt einfach permanent gerade am Durchlesen bin, und ich meine Stimme nicht gleich killen will, und die schon 1,5 Stunden drin sind. Das war ein Two-Parter. Wie diese Taktik funktioniert, was das noch mit diesen ganzen Artefakt-Sachen sich auf sich hat und ob sie Raichu besiegen können und auch vielleicht auch den Oni. Werden wir beim nächsten Mal sehen. Und ich finde das schon wieder bisher eine sehr interessante Novel. Ich bin mal gespannt, ob wir Mount Whiteground im Calvard betreten oder sehen werden. Als eine Area. Und ob ihr vielleicht Sayu und Dao vielleicht oder auch Junan als Characters wieder treffen werden, vielleicht aber auch unter einem anderen Namen. Oder vielleicht halt einfach die Matagi Tribe oder die Woodland Wanderers. Beides wäre interessant. Aber ja. Ich hoffe, es hat euch gefallen. Wie immer gerne Feedback, Support da und wir sehen uns dann morgen mit der wirklich letzten Folge zu Trace and Reverie, wenn wir Moonless Morn abschließen. Bis dahin. Ciao. Und bye bye.